Bug-Eyed Tales recounts the enigmatic and sometimes unexplainable experiences of hunters in the depths of the ancient forests of 19th century India. Here, a British officer in the Indian Army encounters the mystic connection between man and the wild within the shadowy underbrush of nature's oldest sanctuaries. Settle in as we journey into the heart of the Indian jungle, where the lines between the natural world and the supernatural blur into one in The Phantom Tiger by Major Burton of the Indian Army.
Many strange things happen in the primeval forest, things for which one is utterly unable to explain. Hunters who wander in the wild places of the earth, penetrating deep into remote jungles far from the haunts of man, sometimes meet with strange adventures. A sportsman may spend years pursuing wild beasts across rugged terrains, yet despite his efforts, often remains largely ignorant of the true nature and intricate behaviors of his quarry. Meanwhile, another hunter, deeply connected to his primal instincts and in profound harmony with nature, quickly masters the ways of the wild and its enigmatic mysteries. Some years ago, my camp was pitched under a spreading banyan tree on the bank of the river Ganga in the northern part of the state of Hyderabad. It was the height of the hot weather, and the stream contained but little water, the wild animals resorting to the larger pools and reaches in the early morning, and at the setting of the sun to quench their thirst. Here, herds of spotted deer and small groups of nilgai, a type of large Asian antelope, gathered. One day, I unexpectedly came upon a cow bison with her calves, who had ventured to drink shortly after sunrise. Following their natural prey, the great predaceous beasts also resorted to the watercourse, where they nightly prowled or lay in wait for their victims. In the tall trees overhead, those scavengers of the forest, the vultures, built their nests, and by watching them one could sometimes find the place where the midnight marauder had been at work. Over the remains of the victim, they would soar, at first far up, mere specks in the azure sky, and gradually descending, would alight on the adjacent trees, or on the carcass of the prey should the tiger not be near to drive the intruders from the feast. Here, close to the riverbank, I killed one tiger which had eaten one of my buffaloes. Being too far from camp to carry the great carcass in, the tiger was skinned on the spot, and the vultures soon picked his bones of every vestige of flesh. Next night, another tiger killed a buffalo at the same spot, but left his prey untouched. And when on the following night, a tigress with 2 cubs passed close to a third buffalo, even went to look at it, as could be seen from the tracks, but did not molest the patient beast. I began to think there was something uncanny about the place. Perhaps all these tigers were frightened by the whitening bones of their deceased relative, or perhaps his spirit, haunting that dismal solitude, warned them of the proximity of danger. At any rate, they left the place hastily and fled into the night. Wandering far from camp, I came one day upon a dark pool of water deep in the jungle and under the shadow of a giant tree. There were no living creatures in sight, yet the mud at the edge of the pool bore the distinct imprint of a great tiger's paws. Other animals had been there also, for there was no water, but this for miles around. On the soft margin of the pool could be read the comings and goings of all the beasts of the forest. The deer, bears, 4-horned antelope, and the marks of many birds, peafowl, jungle fowl, and quail. A lone porcupine quill lay on the bank, but dominating the scene were the fresh, unmistakable tracks of a great tiger, clearly the most recent marks among them. Organizing a hunting drive in this remote and challenging location was nearly impossible. Moreover, it was difficult to find beaters, locals hired to flush out wildlife, since the nearest human settlement was over 10 miles away. The local inhabitants would not go near the place, for they said it was haunted. Thus, the only viable strategy to capture the elusive tiger, whose tracks I had encountered, was to patiently lie in wait for it. The branches of the tree which overshadowed the pool afforded a good place of concealment, whence the watcher could obtain a clear view of the animal should he return to slake his thirst. I took up my place of concealment among the branches of the great tree late in the afternoon, when the sun had already reached the tops of the tall trees in the west, and as night's phantom army, the shadows of the forest, advanced across the face of the water, the animals began to issue from their retreat in the surrounding thickets. The little barking deer and four-horned antelope came down with dainty footstep to the water's edge and dipped their soft muzzles in the life-giving fluid. A peacock appeared, spreading his proud tail before a bevy of sober-plumaged hens. A jungle cock crowed loudly in a patch of grass, and his challenge was taken up in the adjacent thicket. A troop of grey monkeys with black faces came swinging from tree to tree, and one or two at a time, with caution and fear expressed in their movements and in the grimaces on their sooty countenances, came down to snatch a hasty draught of water. The heat and the exertions of the day made me sleepy, and more than once I found myself nodding over the rifle that lay across my knees. At last I must actually have fallen asleep, and as I slept, I dreamt. Suddenly it seemed all the voices of the forest were hushed. The animals that had come to drink disappeared as if by magic, and in the grey light of the approaching night, no living thing remained. Then there came a human cry, a shriek of fear and agony. From the bushes some distance up the ravine in which the pool lay, followed by the roar of a tiger. A moment more, and all was still again. I remained spellbound, unable to move hand or foot. Next, I heard the deep breathing of the tiger as the beast came down the watercourse, and the sound of his velvet footfall in the dry leaves. He was evidently dragging his victim with him, for the heels could be heard trailing through the leaves. The monster came nearer and nearer. He approached the pool, but I could see nothing, although it was quite light and all objects were distinctly visible. I heard the sound of his ghastly burden being dropped on the water's edge, and of his lapping tongue, which disturbed the surface and sent rings out from the margin. But still no living thing was visible. After quenching its thirst, it resumed its burden and continued down the Nulla, a seasonal stream that flows only during the rainy months. And as I looked, the distinct footprints of a tiger were impressed one by one in the sand, accompanied by the track of dragging heels, extending down the ravine as far as the eye could see. Yet, the beast itself remained invisible. I awoke about midnight, feeling rather ashamed of myself for falling asleep. So vivid had my strange dream vision been that I had difficulty in shaking off the impression it had made upon me. The moon had not yet risen, and it was pitch dark. I grasped my rifle and peered into the deepening gloom. There was no sign of a cat-like form, no sound of stealthy tread. Scarcely even could I distinguish the glimmer of a solitary star in the depths of the pool below. Presently, however, a faint effulgence heralded the coming moon. Faint, ghost-like outlines of trees appeared, and gradually the white light spread through the forest, deepening the shadows and lighting up the water below. Suddenly, something emerged from the shadows and stood on the bank above the pool, grey and indefinite in form. As my eyes became accustomed to the light, I saw that it was an immense tiger. The beast walked to the water's edge when a bullet from my trusty rifle pierced the point of his shoulder, and he fell dead without a sound. In the morning, my men came, and we went up the watercourse to the place where I had heard the human cry in the vision of the night. There among the bushes we found a woodman's rusty axe and a few rags which had been part of the clothing of its owner. They had evidently been lying there some months. Following the course of the ravine for 100 yards beyond the pool, I found no tiger's tracks, but something gleamed round and white in the rays of the rising sun. It was a human skull. From this, we were able to reconstruct the scene of the tragedy that had taken place. The woodcutter had been killed by a tiger at the place where we found his axe, and the monster had dragged his victim down the Nulla and devoured him where the skull lay, no doubt stopping on the way to drink at the pool. The tragedy had occurred some months previously, and in all probability the tiger I had killed was the murderer. But why or how the vision should have been presented to the watcher over the pool, it is impossible for me to say. I asked the shikari, a local hunter and guide, what he thought of it. but he would not say much.
Sahib, there are many things that happen in the forest we know little about. Even we who have wandered in the wilds for 40 years. The indigenous Gonds tribe, known for their deep connection to the forest, could enlighten us if they chose to. They are almost as wild as the beasts of the forest themselves. They have warned that they avoid that jungle, believing a demon resides there. Moreover, they claim that this axe belonged to Lungota Papa, a member of their community who ventured into the forest to cut wood 6 months ago and mysteriously disappeared, never to be seen again.
As the days passed, the unsettling atmosphere of the jungle seemed to lighten slightly, as if Lungota Papa's spirit had been acknowledged and could now rest. Despite the local warnings and the eerie occurrences, I ventured back to the site with a small group of brave Gonds, driven by a need to understand or perhaps to challenge the jungle's hidden depths. We held a modest ceremony there, offering respects to the lost woodcutter and any spirits residing within the lush wilderness. To our surprise, the following nights were peaceful, and no further cries or ghostly apparitions disturbed the area. It was as if the acknowledgement of the tragedy and the recognition of the powerful force of nature had restored a balance, while the mystery of the phantom tiger and the fate of Lungota Papa would linger in our minds. There was a sense of closure, a strange peace that settled over the jungle, suggesting that sometimes understanding the forest's mysteries isn't about seeing, but about accepting the unseen.